Story 1. Little to no opinions, just reporting on facts and events. Of course, there is some bias in what they choose to cover, which is why you should have more than one news source. But Reuters is my top choice. Associated Press, Bloomberg, and British Broadcasting Corporation are also widely considered neutral and fact-based. Story 2. Raw footage. There's no need to listen to everyone discussing whether Zelensky said thank you or not when you can see it's one of the first things he mentions in that meeting. Story 3. Tangle offers a nice balance on current political topics. It is an email newsletter. Based on the topic for the day, it features what the left is saying, what the right is saying, and my take, which is the author's measured perspective supported by sources. I enjoy reading it as the author is usually quite level-headed. Story 4. Reddit is becoming increasingly negative. I strongly dislike Donald Trump. I have close friends losing critical jobs in the federal government. What I dislike even more is being compelled to defend his actions due to misleading propaganda presented here as questions. The reality is challenging enough. Story 5. Heather Cox Richardson writes a daily newsletter that breaks down the issues of the day. She is a historian at Boston College. While she is critical of Donald Trump, she reports facts and provides historical perspective, offering insights that extend beyond what appears in the headlines. Story 6. The BBC is a news source that strives to be balanced. It often reports critically on itself, and the fact that some individuals claim it is too right-wing while others assert it is too left-wing suggests it is maintaining an appropriate balance. Story 7. If you can read different countries' newspapers. The difference between the British, French, and Spanish news sources I read, such as the British Broadcasting Corporation, The Times, Le Monde, and El País on the same topics is staggering. I would also like to acknowledge the Toronto Star and Globe and Mail this week. Story 8. I don't trust any one news source. I browse through various sites to find headlines, events, and incidents. If one interests me, I look up the story across multiple sources to piece together the bigger picture. I place more trust in any official document, announcement, or direct quote from someone directly involved in the story. Story 9. Reuters and MeidasTouch are two news sources. Reuters is known for its unbiased reporting, providing news without opinions. MeidasTouch offers balanced information, leaning slightly left while not hesitating to criticize Democrats who fail to serve the public. They have even pointed out some of President Biden's policies that have received negative feedback. Story 10. Just a moment. Let's check the list of news outlets banned from the White House for refusing to report the administration's opinions as facts. It appears the Associated Press is included, and I also prefer Reuters. Story 11. CBC certainly has a liberal slant, but is more neutral than its critics suggest. It is a good, reliable source for Canadian and international news. It will be a dark day when the Conservatives get elected and shut it down. Story 12. In my country, Norway, most of the established sources are reliable. We do not have many different news channels. Internationally, I trust the British Broadcasting Corporation. Story 13. I want to emphasize the importance of paying attention to all the news outlets. If you use Google News, for instance, you can see a headline and then check the coverage of that story by other sources. It is crucial to observe how different outlets report the same story. If you are analytical, you can begin to notice the differences. Some reports are more fact-based and data-driven, which is essential for understanding the nuances of a story. By paying attention to what others are saying, you will gradually start to recognize the biases present in various reports. You may notice how some sources spin a story according to their biases, while others make outright false statements that amount to little more than opinion. This awareness will help you understand how some outlets attempt to manipulate readers. It is vital for you to investigate these matters and question the reasons behind such manipulations. Consider who stands to benefit from misleading the reader. Anyone who obtains their news from a single outlet will likely maintain a strong bias, which can often be observed in their interactions with others. Story 14. I apply the same strategy one learned when I first started paying attention shortly after Fox News was established. I follow multiple independent podcasts from both sides, realizing the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Story 15. As others have mentioned, Reuters, the Associated Press, and National Public Radio are reliable sources. However, the more important aspect is to develop and trust your media literacy. I can read a Fox News article and separate the facts from the misinformation. Even with more reputable organizations, I can identify implicit biases, misinformation by omission, or the framing of abnormal situations as normal. Understanding history is also crucial. Equally important is acknowledging your own biases and challenging yourself occasionally. Do I believe this because I belong to Group X rather than Group Y? Am I ignoring contradictory evidence? What is the simplest explanation when there is a lack of facts? Reflecting on these questions is essential. Story 16. Associated Press and Reuters. Additionally, anyone that the White House states cannot report or attend press conferences. Story 17. National Public Radio and the British Broadcasting Corporation don't always push back on certain things as much as I would hope, but I have great confidence that the stories I hear are factual and well-researched. Story 18. Associated Press, Reuters, British Broadcasting Corporation, and New York Times often make questionable editorial decisions. Story 19. AP is my go-to source. It is neutral, minimal in editorializing, and focused on delivering the facts. I have my own opinions and do not need my news sources to cater to me or keep me in an echo chamber. Story 20. AP, Reuters, BBC, and Al Jazeera are my primary sources, depending on the topic and geographic location. I stay tuned in to MSNBC and Fox to at least be aware of what is being reported on each side of the political bias, but I would not take anything from either of them as true without corroborating it with another source or two. Story 21. Any news source that needs to be read should present information in an engaging manner. News should provide new insights, not simply reaffirm existing biases or be filled with commentary. If I didn't learn anything, it is not news. Story 22. Associated Press, Reuters, Al Jazeera. Alternatively, find reliable journalists you enjoy and follow them on Substack. Story 23. Do not rely on editorialized news. Trump said this, Trudeau said that. Why not just listen to what they actually said in the full uninterrupted video? I do not trust any news article title. Story 24. All Sides offers 3 articles on the same topic from varying perspectives: left, right, and center. Reading all of them allows you to discern the facts. This approach has been the most effective way for me to distinguish truth from emotion. They even provide a methodology for how each source is ranked. Story 25. Reuters, National Public Radio, Democracy Now!, Public Broadcasting Service, Al Jazeera English, MediaStutch Media, BBC, Brian Tyler Cohen, and Legal AF are among the sources I follow. Sadly, people like John Oliver and Jon Stewart, along with their teams, are often better journalists than most legacy media. Everyone can benefit from some humor in challenging times. It acts like a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. I follow many legal matters, so it's important to understand multiple perspectives before making decisions. I need to see both the broader context and the finer details. I require verifiable proof rather than hyperbolic talking points or conspiracy-based opinions. I want to see the policy, evidence, and data points, as well as the credibility of the authorities that presented the facts. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Story 26. Reuters. I also like BBC. Additionally, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency website may be useful in case the United States decides not to cover the bird flu anymore. Story 27. I use InfoWars, BuzzFeed, Breitbart, and Mother Jones. Then I add up their opinions and divide by 4, which gives me a decent approximation. Story 28. Al Jazeera English provides live, on-site reporting and interviews, offering some of the most researched and beautifully produced documentaries I have ever seen. They maintain an unbiased perspective and report from multiple points of view. Do not rely solely on what the media says about Al Jazeera. Explore their content yourself. They are available for free on YouTube. Story 29. The Economist and Christian Science Monitor provide valuable insights. I also listen to Washington Journal on C-SPAN. They report what is happening without additional commentary. Additionally, I sometimes listen to various congressional hearings. It is interesting to hear the full discussions instead of just sound bites on the news. Story 30. I completely stay away from Fox News or CNN unless there is a major event that is non-political, as they provide the most coverage. Story 31. Philip DeFranco is the most consistent news source I follow. I am not interested in celebrity drama, but news is news, and he presents it clearly. I also check other resources to gauge their bias, but primarily try to stick to central news sources. Story 32. I believe Forbes has been performing well with their unedited posts and updates. It is essential to consult more than one source, similar to conducting research for a paper. Gather multiple sources of information to reach a well-supported conclusion. Story 33. Reuters, Associated Press, and the Christian Science Monitor are respected sources. When I was in journalism school in the 1990s, the Christian Science Monitor was considered one of the gold standards for unbiased reporting, known for its quality long-form, in-depth articles. I still subscribe to all three. Story 34. I enjoy America Uncovered and All Sides for presenting both sides of a story. Additionally, I like the Free Press and their podcast Honestly. Story 35. I use Straight Arrow News. It's free and offers a media misreport showing who is or is not covering a story. Story 36. I mostly read the main news agencies, such as the Associated Press, Reuters, and Agence France-Presse. But I moved to the United States a long time ago and still find myself reading the public broadcaster of my home nation in Europe. Stylistically, most news options in the United States are often overly focused on sensationalism these days. Story 37. I signed up for Ground News after Adam Conover promoted it for the breakdown of what news feeds cover different topics. I am not sure if I will keep it. Time will tell. I signed up for Associated Press as soon as Trump banned it from various venues, of course. Reuters, BBC World News, and National Public Radio round out my regular rotation. Story 38. Fact-based reporting of an event. Associated Press, Reuters, British Broadcasting Corporation Public Broadcasting Service. Economic reporting. Financial Times, The Economist. Opinion reporting and expert analysis. ProPublica, The Atlantic, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. Story 39. I read international publications and watch global news. Then I watch American news media. It seems to balance the perspectives. Additionally, I use my education to filter out as much misinformation as possible. Story 40. Fake news is simply a term for bias. To address it, I believe it is important to have multiple sources of news, which I think people should do regardless. I find it interesting to read articles from opposing viewpoints to understand how different perspectives interpret issues. Story 41. Hilarious. The original poster is asking for credible news sources but is being inundated with unreliable ones. We are in trouble. Story 42. I like Tangle. They have a daily newsletter via email and a podcast. They provide insights into what the right and left are saying, along with Isaac's perspective. Sometimes they aren't perfect, but they admit when they are wrong. You just have to listen consistently. Story 43. The Economist is the gold standard in unbiased journalism. It provides rational and fair coverage on highly controversial issues, such as former President Trump and conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza. Story 44. Sharon McMahon on Instagram and Substack has been crucial for helping me understand government and how it works. She is a former high school teacher who provides the news along with sources and important context in terms of history and how things came to be. She has a podcast and occasionally features guest spots as well. Story 45. Only Legal News. Media's Touch and Legal AF, both on YouTube, are lawyers who provide facts from a legal standpoint rather than opinions. Story 46. Bloomberg Business News tends to diverge during political discussions. The BBC is quite similar to what we had before foreign right-wing funding influenced its direction. Story 47. Bloomberg, Axios, and NPR. I want to highlight my colleague John Sean at Axios and the impressive interview he conducted with Trump during the pandemic. Story 48. I read the Wall Street Journal. If you avoid the opinion section, which is both critical of and positive toward Trump, you get fairly balanced reporting. I am a moderate and have voted for both Democrats and Republicans. Story 49. A mix of news, documentary-style reporting, individuals, and whistleblowers. The Gray Zone, Democracy Now!, ProPublica, Jacobin, Breakthrough News, James Lee, Boy Boy, Hassan Piker, Second Thought, Rachel Gilmore, Empire Files, Abby Martin, Mint Press News, Ken Klippenstein, Max Blumenthal, Greg Stoker, Seymour Hersh, Sanaa Saeed, Norman Finkelstein, Jeffrey Sachs, and others. These are all leftist sources. Everything that is liberal or conservative legacy media continues to spread disinformation and propaganda daily. They have no choice but to defend the military-industrial complex. I trust individuals who have worked within the United States empire and have come out against it for the betterment of the world. Mainstream media, including MSNBC, Fox, CNN, and BBC, intentionally obstructs news that you will only hear from independent sources. These sources come from people on the front lines of these stories, and mainstream media depends on people who consume their propaganda to dismiss anything else. This tactic is effective. There is always pushback when you try to make people aware of what they are missing. There are well-meaning liberals who help spread misinformation just as conservatives do, often without realizing it. They unintentionally spread right-wing propaganda because they believe corporate media does not lie to them. Story 50. A lot of people have already said it, but I have always found the Associated Press to provide straightforward and factual reporting. Story 51. I don't trust any of them. You just can't. You have to listen to everything. Then there's something inside you that you need to make an informed decision. I'm not sure what it's called. Story 52. None of them are unbiased. They will say anything for ratings. If they report facts, it often involves high drama or catastrophic circumstances that enhance their ratings. Story 53. People say NPR is biased. But frankly, if the reporting is factual, what does conservative leaning even mean? Oil prices are up and religious schools are on the rise. NPR would report both of those. Story 54. Steve Martin. I guess I wouldn't believe in anything anymore if it weren't for my lucky astrology mood watch. Story 55. None really, I double and triple check. In US politics, I read both the left and right sides, compare them with the middle, and build my own understanding. Also, no source has ever been truly independent. Story 56. I don't feel there is a single trustworthy source. There is always some bias, not necessarily malicious or manipulative, but details are often left out and stories are ignored. I prefer news aggregation applications, as viewing a story from multiple angles can provide an idea of how different people frame it. Story 57. I use the Ground News application. It displays news from both perspectives and indicates which stories each side is not covering. I highly recommend it. Story 58. V. Specher at Under the Desk News on YouTube provides insights on current events and shares relevant clips. I also utilize Ground News to gather additional talking points. Story 59. I start with Phil DeFranco on YouTube. I have been watching him almost since he began his channel. He always includes links to the articles he reports on. Of course, I am not naive. If something is extremely important, I check other sources to verify the information. Story 60. The amount of distrust in our news is saddening. We have some really great journalists in the United States. The Associated Press and Reuters are the gold standard. But the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, PBS NewsHour, ABC News, NBC News, USA Today, National Public Radio, the Los Angeles Times, Chicago Tribune, The Economist, and Marketplace all do good work and have solid editorial processes and fact-checkers. Do they get it right all the time? No, but they do a much better job than cable news networks, political influencers, or random individuals. The factor that allowed Trumpism to take root is distrust in the media and in each other. Story 61. NPR and Reuters are both quite unbiased when it comes to reporting. Before anyone criticizes NPR, I am referring to their reporting. Their opinion shows are obviously biased, but their reporting is absolutely objective. Additionally, Ground News is valuable for identifying blind spots in reporting. Story 62. I listen to NPR in my car and have for years. Honestly, I believe a significant portion of all the information I know came from NPR. It filled in the gaps of my inadequate civics education, keeps me informed about world events, provides factual rather than emotional economic news, and offers a variety of entertainment programming as well. I can tell what time of day it is by what's playing on NPR. The New York Times, Vox, and even the Wall Street Journal all have podcasts hosted by former NPR journalists. I cannot praise their work highly enough. Story 63. The sources you can trust are the ones that those who claim fake news oppose. This includes most major established news outlets. Even Fox is fairly reliable for topics other than politics. Story 64. AP News is where most organizations source information and then provide their own perspective, so it's best to read directly from the source. I also like BBC, but they occasionally include their own opinions as well. Story 65. Take a right-wing source and a left-wing source, and somewhere in the middle is what is actually happening. Story 66. People often criticize the New York Times for various biases, such as left-leaning perspectives, coverage of Gaza, and corporate interests. However, they genuinely produce quality reporting and, like all sources, benefit from a critical examination. Story 67. I mostly check out what people are saying. I really believe that news sources are strongly influenced by the government they relate to, so I prefer hearing from people on site. Story 68. I just check a few sources if something seems off. If it seems really off, I'll go back and try to find the original source, then verify who they are and how factual they have been previously. Weirdly, I find Reddit gives me a pretty balanced view, as people are quick to check things and point out inaccuracies. Story 69. I usually go between Sky News and BBC News, primarily for UK-based news. However, if I want world news without too much of an Anglo-American perspective, I prefer France 24 or Euronews. Story 70. BBC, Associated Press, and Reuters provide current events coverage. Wired is also producing excellent journalism at this time. For long-form investigative reporting, ProPublica is difficult to surpass. Story 71. There is only one name in news I trust. Story 72. Also, you can't just read the headline, that's how they gain clicks. If you aren't invested enough to read the entire article, then just accept that you don't want to know. Story 73. Associated Press and Reuters provide news that is as unbiased as possible. I also enjoy Tangle, especially because everything is broken down clearly, making it easy to follow. I alternate between these sources and dedicate about 30 minutes at the end of the workday to read the news, so I don't obsess over it throughout the day. Story 74. Reuters, the Associated Press, and CBC are my main sources. The Guardian is also a reliable source due to its global reporting and separation from American politics. Story 75. I like to explore comprehensive coverage on Google News and compare the bias in the various headlines covering the same topic. Then I skim a few articles and delve deeper if necessary. Story 76. I trust no sources initially. I use them as starting points. If I hear something interesting, I begin researching. I try to implement the same standards that colleges have. Cite your sources and verify how credible those sources are. Story 77. Ground News compiles news articles about a subject from both right-leaning and left-leaning sources and highlights any blind spots. It is essentially all I use now. Story 78. Honestly, I have been asking an AI called Perplexity, and it does a good job of providing a balanced overview of various sources. I sometimes use Ground News to find the least biased sources reporting on a given story. It is exhausting. Story 79. I try to read sources from various places to form my own conclusions about the truth. My friend recently told me about a podcast called Tangle. They review a specific issue, present the perspectives from the left and right, and then share their own opinion. It's interesting. Story 80. I gather headlines from various sources. If I have to choose one, I usually select the Associated Press. They are relatively unbiased, even if they won't rename a 400-year-old feature in the Gulf of Mexico. Story 81. As a longtime news enthusiast, I frequently visit the Associated Press, Reuters, BBC, National Public Radio, and the New York Times. On major issues, when I encounter controversy regarding facts or the narration of a story, I will look at Fox News or Newsmax to understand why it is presented as controversial and then verify the claims. Occasionally, they have prompted me to consider issues from their audience's perspective. For issues involving the Middle East, I refer to Al Jazeera, as they offer sources and perspectives from that region that others may not. It is important to note that every organization has varying degrees of editorial bias, often driven by audience engagement. The extent to which these engagements adhere to facts and truth is what I believe defines a serious journalistic enterprise. Story 82. Corroded reference and filter propaganda. Use alternative search engines due to internet censorship. Story 83. I mostly observe what was actually said and done, and it's easy to draw conclusions from there. People often claim that biased media makes the former president look foolish. He does that all on his own. Story 84. Under the Desk News or Aaron Parnas is where I get my news from. I haven't been on TikTok much lately, but I follow V on YouTube and Aaron on Substack. Story 85. Do not trust any single source. Consider 3 or more different viewpoints. If multiple sources report the same information, it is more likely to be true. However, remain cautious about websites that present various viewpoints, as biases can still emerge even from attempts at neutrality. When verifying important information, start with Reddit for the base story, then compare it with a left-leaning source, a right-leaning source, and a source from another country. Story 86. NPR, BBC, and Deutsche Welle are 3 reputable sources from different countries, making them valuable for international news. Deutsche Welle also offers engaging documentaries on its YouTube channel. Story 87. There is a wonderful podcast named The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, which I highly recommend. The podcast is released weekly on Saturday mornings, as they record on Wednesday nights. They usually hold a weekly live stream on Wednesdays around noon Eastern Time. If we're lucky, they also do another live stream on Fridays. All are critical thinkers and science communicators. I typically listen to the live streams after work, but I checked in earlier today when they were discussing measles, vitamin A, and transgenic mice. Overall, great content. Story 88. I do not trust any one source. If I see something has happened, I corroborate with a multitude of sources. While news agencies like the Associated Press and Reuters report the facts without opinions, it is still important for me to check other sources to verify their information. Story 89. Many mainstream news sites are reputable, but it is essential to read between the lines and recognize any obvious bias. I read news with both liberal and conservative perspectives and filter out any bias from there. Story 90. I have essentially stopped using mainstream news entirely and now consume mostly independent sources like Midas Touch and Brian Tyler Cohen. I am tired of the sanitization of current events by traditional news outlets. Story 91. I watch NHK News Japan. They do not spend much time on US politics, so I can relax a bit. In the United States, ProPublica is an excellent source. Story 92. We rely on Public Broadcasting Service, National Public Radio, and the New York Times for well-researched and truthful reporting, acknowledging their left-leaning perspectives. We have no need for sources beyond these 3. Story 93. I try to use a wide selection to cover all bases. I regularly read Cable News Network, Associated Press News, Fox News, Reuters, and British Broadcasting Corporation. Story 94. Don't rely on a single source for news. When you find a story of importance, look for other sources to confirm the report. If it is a verbatim copy, disregard it and seek further confirmation. Story 95. Tangle is a daily newsletter that covers one main topic each day, presenting the facts and excerpts from multiple articles on each side of the issue. It also includes a My Take section from one of the editors. While I don't always agree with the My Take section, I appreciate their open approach to the issue and their presentation of good faith arguments from both sides. Story 96. Podcasts provide a perspective on current events and reflect public opinion. I am surprised that The View is still on the air. My favorite news segments feature guests from diverse backgrounds to facilitate debate. Currently, The Democratic talking points seem weak, particularly regarding issues like transgender boys participating in girls' sports. Story 97. Original source is best. If someone claims there was election fraud, ask for a source. If they say bears are a family in New Mexico, ask for a source. I generally like BBC, Associated Press, and Reuters, though. Story 98. 1440 is proving to be decent. It is not great for detailed looks at anything but serves as a good summary of important information. Story 99. I do not watch any of it. I gather information from court decisions and Senate reports and find the relevant media reports on those facts. I do not pay much attention to any source's bias as long as the article supports the research. Story 100. Rick is in the break room. He primarily shares news about the classic cars he is currently considering on Facebook Marketplace. Overall, it's positive news. Story 101. Secular Talk on YouTube. Kyle provides insightful commentary on current events, operates without corporate sponsorship, and clearly breaks down stories to make them easier to understand. Watch a few of his clips to get a sense of his content. I have been a regular viewer since 2015. Story 102. I listen to Bloomberg Radio in my car. It is focused on the market, leaving little room for political spin, as the market is the ultimate arbiter of what is happening in the United States and around the world. The market does not care about anyone's opinion, and I appreciate that. Story 103. I have just learned about Tangle, which does a decent job of presenting issues objectively. Story 104. Those who, when sued for libel, attempt to prove they told the truth rather than claim that no reasonable person could believe their statements. Of course, it is necessary to apply critical reasoning and skepticism to everyone, but ultimately, I want to know they are at least trying to do a decent job. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.